What up? I'm Josh Paulison, a professional game programmer at Defiance Game Studio, and today I'm going to talk about stress, which definitely nobody in the games industry ever experiences. All right, so I want to start actually with talking a little bit about what I've been doing the past 2 weeks, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about stress. Not because these past 2 weeks have been particularly stressful, but because stress is something that I've been thinking more about lately. And actually, for me, it's fortunately been not because of having more stress, but actually because of getting better at handling stress and figuring out where the stress is actually coming from. So let's get into these past 2 weeks because it's actually kind of funny some of the stuff that's happened these past 2 weeks. So I was starting to work on some world map graphics. So we've got our hex map where you can run around in the overworld. And one of the things that ended up happening was that me and a coworker were very sure that we understood how the system worked and what the system was doing. And so we had created code to solve the problems, to solve our tasks, to finish our tasks based on our understanding of the system. And then we learned that that wasn't how it worked. But that the results still worked. So we were using the system correctly, but there was some stuff lying around that made us think that we had to create some additional game objects and create some additional setups. And I'm not sure the best way to describe it, but basically it was a layering system where you had a series of game objects, one for each layer in this hex map. And so you'd have a layer that is, hey, this is the ocean, this is the ground, this is a mountain graphic on top, these are some little decorations and stuff like that. And so you have all these game objects, and so you think, oh, okay, if I want to add a new layer, I must need to add a new game object. I must need to add a new object. And that turned out not to be true at all. And those objects were basically a red herring that somebody else in the past probably thought that they needed to do that and added them in. And so everybody who came after that was like, oh, well, this is what's here, so surely I need to do the same thing. And it turned out that those were completely unneeded, and actually we're probably going to remove all of them and only have one in order to solve some other problems that we're now getting with layering. So yeah, we just a kind of general reminder that just because something works doesn't mean that it works for the reasons that you think. And when we both saw that, it was pretty funny. It was not really documented clearly anywhere, so it was a very natural assumption, and we both were assuming the same thing, and then just looking more into it, it was like, well, wait a second, this doesn't seem right. Something's up. So that was pretty funny. Another thing that I've been up to is I've been doing a few different tasks also with although I don't have those ones in my notes and just really started on them, but I guess I'll go into, I've done quite a bit of refactoring. So one of the things that we were running into, and I'm actually going to refactor some of my own code in front of you to show you some of the thought processes and things coming up with it, but you can have a lot of different functions that somebody in the past was like, oh, if you want to solve this problem, call this function, and then 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 this function, and then, you know, keep going, and then you keep going, until eventually you're off the bottom of this camera. So here's the problem, is that other people don't know that coming in. And if it's not commented, then they definitely don't know that. And so one of the things that we found was that there were certain places where you had a series of functions that you needed to call in C#. They're called methods. That's a little too low. Here's my face. So they're called methods in C#. Doesn't matter. When you have functions that need to be called in a certain order, make some collection function and make sure that people call that instead. Because what I was seeing in the code base was that different combinations were called at different times, and sometimes they were called multiple times because there wasn't clarity on what was going on. And so I ended up working on one function to rule them all for travel. So you pass in a location, you go to that location. We have some more complexity where it's not just about moving from A to B, but it's, hey, if you're seeing the hex map, we want you to see your graphic move. Hey, if you don't have the hex map, we don't want to try moving a graphic. Oh, hey, also, if you are moving into a combat scenario, or let's say that you are moving into a dungeon, or let's say that you are moving into a building, we need to change all of the graphics around everything. And so I made one function to rule them all for travel, and I also made a function that's sort of a like safety function, so that if we need to just refresh all of the GUI in the game, you can just call this function, which is kind of awful on the one hand, but it also is, ideally it's sort of a failsafe, and also then when you load up a game, you can just run that right off the bat, and you'll know that your GUI should be what it's supposed to be, because whatever state you're loading into, we need to make sure that we're showing the GUI properly. I don't know how much that makes sense. I hope that it makes sense. And some of the refactoring was also adding comments throughout the code. So one of the things that's a big risk is that you might be going through your own code or looking at code, and maybe you're not quite sure what it does, or it's named in a certain way, but it's for a very specific purpose. And so I was going through and adding comments where some of that wasn't clear. Another problem tied to that is similarly named methods, or functions that are not named exactly what they, named by exactly what they do. And this can happen. So one of the things that I want to say is that all of these problems that I'm stating, they're not happening because people are stupid. They're happening because people are solving their own problems, and then it conflicts with other things, or there's not clarity. So there's a lot of reasons that this sort of thing happens, and some of it might be that you have something that was used for one purpose initially, now it needs to solve other problems, or somebody realized that, hey, this doesn't work with this new system, so we need to tweak it, and maybe some old stuff gets left lying around. They think that all the old stuff is still critical. There's a lot of things that can happen that cause problems, but one of the things that can happen is similarly named functions. So for example, we had and this is something that I was working on, I think yesterday or the day before, but where we had build building, we had build building on hex, we had build building in town, we had location.add building, we had building.onBuilt. We had building.setup, and onBuilt was only supposed to be run if it was built inside of a town, and setup was always supposed to be run, but onBuilt was always run and setup was not always run. It needed some love. So and again, there's ways that these things happen. There's ways that this comes about, and in some cases it might be that somebody didn't realize that there was already a hook there, but a lot of it was cleaning up some of that. And the goal of any refactor is that we want to move faster. So one thing that we talked about recently at work, and I think this is a good gauge, is do you think this will save you 4 times the amount of time that you're spending on it? Because you're always going to be underestimate, so that's why you would go 4 times. If you think it will save you 4 times more time than you spent doing it, then it's worth doing. Now, to just kind of talk a little about refactoring, and we'll get into stress. And I guess that refactoring should reduce stress. So there you go. I guess I figure it would be interesting to show a little bit of my own refactoring process and some of the things that I think about with some of my own code over here, which is definitely flawless, and you will not find anything wrong in it. Okay. So let's get started. So this is code that I have written for a side project, and so I have no qualm showing this at all. So let's go through a few things here. So first off, we can see that there are up here, and actually, you know what? I'll make this code a little bit bigger. I'm hoping it's readable. It looks readable. So I'm going to start by deleting these usings that are not being used. So we are trying to call in packages that we don't actually care about. Let's just remove those. Now, is that critical? Is that going to save me 4 times time? No, I'm not going to go through every file in the project and remove every unused using, but I'm just going to get a bit nitpicky right now. Okay, here's another thing. So personally, I kind of like this formatting for constants, but it's not the standard. So what I can do is that I can go, okay, fine. We're going to change this to the standard and be unhappy about it, which for MSDN, for Microsoft, they say, hey, use Pascal case, which is the first letter is capitalized and the first letter of each word is capitalized. So for constants, that's what they recommend. And I can do the same thing here. IEnumerator, retry time. So now that's following the standards. Now, this isn't used anywhere. If it's not used anywhere, let's delete it. Now, sometimes something isn't used anywhere, and it's because somebody made a hook for later on. So you do want to be careful and make sure that you are not actually getting rid of something that is shortly after going to be used. But there are cases where it's just way cleaner and where it's just a good thing to do for clarity. Okay, so we've got that. So what is permanent scene? I know what that means, but other people might not. This is the scene that stays the base for the entire game. That's probably not a very good explanation. So let's see. So basically what this does is that it is a scene that is always present inside of the game, and every other scene is loaded on top of it. Now, one of the things that can help sometimes, if you're not quite sure how to explain something, or if there's something that's confusing, you can explain an example. For example, this scene will always be scene 1. And scene 1. Or scene index 0. Scene index 0. And every other scene will be index 1 or higher. So that's one way to explain it. So this scene will always be scene index 0. So something else very... So some of the things that I could mention for concerns or refactoring, that kind of depends on your... It's always going to depend on your team. What are your team's goals? What is clean for your team? So one of the things that is a standard is that you have your comments be no longer than 80 characters long, And that is because a lot of people don't use text wrapper in their code editors. I do, and I don't know if other people think I'm weird for that, but that's something that I do. And so then that's something that can be done as well for the comments, is just to make sure that they don't get too long. So you can see at the bottom, there's this very tiny bit of text. It is extremely tiny. Let's see if I can show it to you. It says column 46. This is how long we are. This is how long the current line is, or where our cursor is at. So if I go over to here, then it's 47. If I go up to here, it's 57. So the ideal would be to keep this around 80 for the column. Wait a second, this is on the same line though. Oh, is it actually, did I just give bad advice? Is it actually character? Yeah, you know what, it's character. Never mind, I lied. Okay, it's character. So it's the CH, not the COL. I was like, wait a second, it's not. I assumed that that would not take into account line wrapping, but it does. Okay, you want CH. I guess I lied. I apologize. Okay. So we've got that. Now, here's a few other things that are worth mentioning around here. So I've got a singleton here. I usually will put my static stuff up above and my const at the very top. Now, usually I want to... There are a few different things that I'll do, but usually if I have all of these, okay, so spawn delay, I'll put my static variables usually at the top, and I'll put my properties below my fields. And there's a property. Okay, so I want to have all my properties here. And here we've got on game start. Another thing that I will do, and this might seem very nitpicky, but I'm going to take all of this. Oh, and you can see that there's more variables hiding down here. This is part of the reason I do this reorganization, is that I will have the Unity built-in methods first. So onValidate, awake, and start. I'll have those first, and then I'll put in anything else after that. Now, if I have any static methods, I'll put those at the very top. You might be like, Josh, why do you care about this at all? This seems like a waste of time. This doesn't seem like a good use of time. Now, in this case, it is, frankly. In this case, for this project, it doesn't really matter. Here's where this matters, is that when you're trying to grok code, when you're trying to understand it, when you're trying to understand what's going on, one of the best things that you can do for your own clarity and for other people over time is to start reorganizing things. If you're like, I don't even know what this is doing, a very simple technique, and this is something that I'll do as I'm processing code, is that I'll start reorganizing things. So if I'm like, I don't even know what this code does, well, I can see that there's variables spread throughout the whole code, throughout the whole file, and I'm not sure what they do. So I'm going to start grouping them all together. So, okay, we've got initial spawn delay. I'm going to move that up. Okay, so there's a enum. Okay, so here are some more fields. Okay, I want to move the fields up to where they are above the properties. And so this is something that I just do to help me process what is actually going on here. Now, when I look at these, I can still ask, well, what is going on throughout these? What do these actually do? I can also organize floats. So, for example, we've got this spawn delay. What does that actually mean? So if I'm not sure what it means, then I can go through here, go, okay, now I already know what this is, so for me it's a whatever, but somebody else would be like, what the heck does that mean? So what this is the delay between pieces spawning into a level. So the delay in animation between pieces spawning into a level. I'm not sure if that's the best description, but for now I'm just going to move forward and assume that it is. I don't know if that's better or worse for the sake of demonstration, but the idea is that you figure out where would somebody else stumble or be confused, and you improve the clarity on that. Now, some of it is that I could also go, oh, you know what, let's change this to piece animation spawn delay. I don't know if that's a great name. It's kind of weird because I'm trying to demonstrate this while also running through it a bit to give a general idea, but it might be that I'm like, you know what, that makes sense, and maybe I don't need to comment anymore. Maybe for initial spawn delay, I'm like, okay, well, this makes sense. I don't need to worry about that. Is loading, what does this mean? Does this mean we are loading a scene? Is loading level on top? Let's do that. So that's a bit more clear, and then we can add comments if it's not clear still. Some people will say, hey, you should never have comments. If you have comments, that means you didn't write your code well. I'd say it's one of those things where some concepts are just confusing. Some concepts are more complex, and while certainly I'm not claiming that all my names here are flawless and they couldn't be improved, there is an extent to where there's no shame in using comments. There's no shame in adding clarity that way. Here's the thing, is that there should never be shame in adding clarity. If your goal is to help other people succeed in your code base, or for you to be able to succeed in your own code base, you want clarity. And so honestly, I would say it is generally better to have too much clarity and then cut things back if you need to than to not have enough, because people can ignore documentation, but they cannot find documentation that isn't there. And so, at least for me, maybe it varies from person to person, it's very quick for me to add these notes in, and hopefully, now, as long as the notes are reducing confusion instead of increasing them, we're in a good way. We're winning, we're on the right path, and that's a good thing. So here, if I keep going down, a great example that I was seeing earlier, oh yeah, here we got update, and again, usually I'll group my Unity methods. That's more of a personal choice. Here we've got this is a method. It's just one liner. Okay, so then if we keep going, so get wall at vector3 int. I probably need to have some clarification somewhere what vector3 int is, but here's actually a better example. So we're in game controller, right? And now get player pieces in contact. What does that mean? Does that mean get player pieces in contact with the game controller? Does that mean get player pieces in contact with what? And so what I can do is that I can change the name of this to make it even longer, and maybe that makes the most sense, but I can also add a comment here. And one of the things that I can do is that sometimes if the reason for doing something is unclear, if it's not just a, hey, what does this thing do, but why would you put it here? You can add a little bit of explanation, not for the purpose of defending yourself, but for the purpose of helping other people coming along know, here's what the thought process was, and here are the problems that I might encounter if I try to refactor this away. So here is what this does. So what this does, let me see here. So get player pieces in contact with me. Okay, so returns a list of all player pieces in contact with the past player piece. Or connected, currently connected with the past player piece. This takes into account colors, arrows, etc. Arrows, and any other blocking details. Or, I mean, really, we only have arrows. So this takes into account our piece arrows on pieces. And then what we can add here is that the reason we handle this here, instead of on the piece, is because we need to be, and I believe that, if I'm remembering this correctly, there's a few different things here, but we need to make sure that each piece, how did we handle this? So get player pieces in contact, me. Okay, so try charge is handled on game controller as well. Yeah, so this will handle it. Let's see, because we need to make sure that each piece is handled, each piece's connections are handled all at once, and that calculations for animations, graphics, and results are handled in a proper order. Putting this at the individual instance level risks these items moving out of order or could require excessive callbacks. Now, I don't remember the full logic of why I originally did it this way, to be perfectly honest, but I'm going to go with that for now. So, but I do remember that some of the issues were that, hey, if we do it this way, or if we do it another way, then we run into issues where we are not getting all the data that we need at once. And so here's one of the things, though, is that let's say that you see a comment like this in the code, and they're like, what the heck? That's a terrible way of doing things. That's awful. At least you understand what the person was thinking, so that you can go and you can say, okay, so if I refactor this, if I need to in order to save 4x time, if it would save 4x time, then I can end up looking at this and I can go, okay, here are the problems that I'm going to have to solve if I refactor this. And so that's really useful. So I think that's, I don't know, if you'd be interested in a more deep dive on refactoring, I mean, this code could definitely use refactoring. I've been the only person touching this code, so I haven't worried too much about it, but I could definitely refactor it. I could add more clarity. If I was going to refactor, it would pretty much be purely for other people's clarity because the code works. And I feel like it's not too bad. Like if somebody had to dive into this, like I'd be a bit embarrassed, but it's not awful. I wouldn't be too concerned about it. You can start tracking things. So yeah, I'm going to move from that, and I'm going to talk about stress. So look at all these stressful people. Look at how stressed they are. They definitely I like that you have like on the same page two pictures that are the same person. But anyway, so looking at stress, one of the things that I realized over the past week, and I feel like it's going to sound very, very weird, is that there is tension throughout my body in different places of my body that is tied to different stresses. And to some people this might sound really weird or maybe even a bit kooky, but I can explain a little bit of what I mean. So there was, I guess to give a broader, longer term example, which I just realized is that and I guess I'll be maybe dangerously vulnerable here. So when it came to anxiety, or for me, when it came to some digestive issues that I was having, there was a while ago when I got some help from a doctor, and it really helped with my digestive issues. And then they started flaring up again, and just didn't seem to work anymore. And at first, I was just like, "Oh well, I just need to get more of it because I haven't been on top of it," and I wasn't. It's not really the fault of the doctor because I wasn't on top of that. But also in praying about it and looking at it more, I really, I sort of believed and didn't believe at the same time that it was actually due to anxiety. And so I could take all the stuff that I wanted in the world, and that wouldn't resolve the anxiety, which was the real issue. And I kind of wasn't sure about that. I was like, this isn't anxiety, this is something else. But as I started to examine where tension in my body was coming from, I started to look at kind of different pieces. And when I was looking and praying about it and just kind of considering, okay, my digestion, I realized that, and again, this is probably going to sound really weird and kooky to people, that's fine, that for me that was really tied up in a fear of letting other people down. And that's where, and again, this is probably going to sound so stupid to some people, but that's where my indigestion was coming from. It was this anxiety of, I'm afraid of letting other people down. And then praying about it and thinking about it, I realized that I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. I want to say that's not a valid fear, but I don't feel like that's going to come across right. The issue is that letting other people down is not an intrinsically bad thing. And what that could mean is that, oh man, I took 2 days to respond to a message instead of 1. Oh man, and a lot of it's really self-induced. It's like, oh man, I was trying to handle all these things and I missed this. I forgot to reply to a message. I'm worried that I was annoying instead of welcoming. Oh no. Like this fear of letting other people down. And maybe some people would examine that and be like, that's actually a fear of letting yourself down. I don't know. In my mind, it was a fear of letting other people down. And I realized that like letting other people down is not an intrinsically bad thing, for one. It's kind of putting myself in responsibility for them or for their emotions. And then also, I mean, there's people in life that I want to let down. That's the best way I can think of putting it. Like for example, if there's somebody who would wish for my harm, or if there's anybody who is coming against me, I want to let them down and succeed and do well in life. And so I'm not aware of anybody in my life right now who's like that. But I guess just as an example, there are people in your life that are worth letting down, or cases where it's worth letting them down. So, and again, I'm not talking about moral failures here. I'm talking about like really a general fear of letting other people down. And as I started to pray through that and work through that, like I had been having these digestive issues. They've been getting way worse. And as I was praying about that and I worked through that, like I just ate things that I was regularly eating. I had coffee, which would normally be really bad, and didn't have any issues. Like I went from pain on the pot to not. That's a terrible way to put that. You didn't need to know that. Anyway, so for me, yeah, my indigestion was caused by, maybe this is way too TMI. I don't know. Too TMI? Too much information? But it's just that anxiety was caused by a false belief. It was caused by a false belief of what I needed to do, and I was putting on myself things that I didn't need to put on myself. And what I found in praying about it and just considering different tension in my body, I generally, like just throughout history, I remember at drama, at theater, we would end up having, we would have these times where we would just all give each other massages before practicing, before performing, as a way to help everyone relax. And I was always told, you're so tense all the time. And I was a tense little kid. And a little kid, I wasn't that little at that point. I was like 16. I guess some of it, no, I guess I would have been 16, maybe 12 for a while. I was younger than I am now. You always think that young is younger than you right now. People who are 60 are like, oh man, 50, that's so young. But that's just how it is. Anyway, so the thing is that, yeah, and as I started to look at like kind of, and it probably sounds really weird and kooky to some people, but as I was looking through different tension in my body, like tension in my shoulders, tension in my back, I was able to be like, you know what, like here's different things. And as I started to process and pray through some of the different pieces of anxiety that I had, I would feel my body physically relax. And so that's something that I realized is that there were different things where it's like, I need to always be thinking through everything. And that included, what am I going to eat? What am I going to watch? It included things that don't really matter that much, where I can just kind of follow my gut or my instinct and it's fine. And so working through a lot of that, it's reduced my stress a lot. Now, there is still a constant self-check with this. Like right now, I can tell that there's a bit of tension back here, and I can tell that that's because of a fear of sharing too much. And I don't know if you saw that, but my shoulders just relaxed as I acknowledged that out loud and as I kind of processed through that. Like it's generally a fear, which may have validity, maybe not. And I'm not saying that this is the solution for everyone. I really want to make sure that this doesn't come across as me being like, here's your solution for stress. I'm just sharing something that's worked for me and been really helpful that I'm hoping helps someone else. So when it comes to stress, when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to like, man, some of these pictures, like, I would be stressed if I was a frog carrying books in a calculator. Like, that's way too much pressure on a frog. But if you look at why am I having this, there are a few things that you can find. One of them is that it's not, hey, your reasons for stress are invalid, but it might be that you're making the wrong thing to focus. Like, I guess something that's very odd to me is that there are a lot of things in my life that are active that I think would be considered very stressful to a lot of people, and are like, no, it's fine. Like, this is not a problem. But where I can have stress is what people think of me through the situation. I'm not afraid of how I handle the situation. I'm not afraid of what I can do in the situation. I'm not even afraid of whether or not a specific piece is a success. Like, where I generally have the fear is what other people will think of me, or in letting other people down. And so when I start to resolve and to work through that, that's really where most of the stress is coming from. And then I can face that thing like, no problem, this is fine. I can work through this, I can figure it out. And so just a big thing is, if you're finding yourself getting really stressed or anxious over different things with your project, if you're like, oh man, like, what's gonna happen if, or I'm just really stressed about this project, I'd encourage you to start looking at where the source is, what are the actual beliefs, and they might be valid beliefs. Like, I will say that there are times where fear is a good check. There are cases where the fear is just push through the fear, ignore it. But there are times where it's a good check. Like, if you have a fear of, you know what, maybe I'm ignoring my relationships. Maybe you're not, and you just need to keep pushing forward. Or maybe you need to go out and be with some friends for a little bit. Maybe that's a healthy thing for you. So fear is not always a bad thing. Fear can be a good guide or a warning sign. It can also be a bad thing. It can also be a really, really damaging thing. And for me, in the cases that I was sharing about, it was very much fear of lies that were not accurate to reality, or things that I shouldn't even be afraid of. And if I should, maybe that sounds like a shaming word. I guess what I mean is that when I really consider reality versus the fears, if the fear came true, it might be the best thing for me. Like, if I let down the right people, that's a good thing. If I and even letting people down in general, that's not really a good. Setting my life based on not letting people down is a terrible vision to live by. That's not going to get me anywhere good in life at all. So I guess where I'm going with this is, let's say that you're working on your game and you're like having all this anxiety and stress about it. Why are you anxious and stressed? And I hope that this does not come across as shaming at all, but it could be for an individual. This might be you, this might not be. That it's, I don't want to look stupid. It could be, I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm doing. It could be, I don't want people to think that I released a bad game. It could be, I don't want people to think that I am incapable. It could be, I don't want people to think that I'm a fraud or that I suck. Or it could be imposter syndrome. And none of those reasons, I hope, are why you started making your game. None of those reasons are why you started to develop it. None of those reasons are why you want to finish it, I hope. And if they are, then this is a good check for you right now to make sure that you work on that. That you work on yourself and that, and you work through that. Because if your primary goal in finishing a project is to look good, that's not a good reason. If your reason is to help encourage others, to uplift other people, if you want to say something that people need to hear, if your goal is to, like, if there's something that you just need to get off of your chest, maybe there's more of a personal reason, like, those are good reasons. But you need to make sure that you're not letting anxiety and bad reasons, because I think that what I found in a lot of cases for myself is that, in general, anxiety is due to having bad reasons for doing things. And again, I'm not saying that that's for everybody, and I really hope that this doesn't come across as me being like, I'm your doctor in anxiety. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just sharing my personal experience, and here's what I found is really helping me. Yeah, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of people holding on to it, and I know that for myself, I've been in the place where, like, there have been points in my life where I had a hard time getting out of bed, or I wasn't physically able to move my body due to anxiety, or things like that. Like, I've been in really bad places, and some of that was at a previous job at Brain Life Center helped me out a ton, and I'm so grateful to God for that forever. And some of that is also, there's always the personal development aspect. There's always the personal responsibility aspect as well. So there's been help that I've gotten, and there's also been that personal development. And I don't want to neglect or pretend that either side is less important. At this point in my life, it's a lot of self-reflection and self-work that's been moving me forward and getting me to that next step. So I just encourage you, if you are feeling stuck, if you're feeling trapped, if you're feeling like really anxious, or if you're feeling, even if you just sense that you're feeling tense in your body somewhere, start asking why. And that tension, it might be, yeah, you're taking something too far, believing a lie. It could be that it's a warning sign of, hey, you're taking on something that you're not meant to take on, or that this is too much right now. Maybe you need to let go of a few projects or focus in on something else. Like, I don't know your specific situation. I can't speak to your specific needs because I don't know them. You know yourself and your situation better than I do, but my hope is that this helps encourage you to self-examine and leads you to having a better day than this frog. Hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions, comments, and also I would just say if you have any, well, yeah, really, it's if you have any questions, because in this case, I really went a lot more personal. In other videos, I really focused on what do I think would be helpful for other people starting off. In this case, I really went into here's what's helped me, and I don't know. I don't know if that's more interesting. I don't know if that's less interesting. I don't know. I've had other people tell me that I'm a really interesting person. I don't think of myself that way, maybe because I live with myself, and so any interestingness about myself has kind of gotten over it. I don't know if that sounds egotistical. I'm not sure. Oh well. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and take care.